Okay, so we are live with Rollo Tomassi, author of the Rational Male book series and blog. This is a great honor, Rollo. I've been following you for a little over 2 years now. I discovered you, I think it was my last year in college
Mhm.
in back in the Midwest, and been following you since then. I bought all your books and I read them all at least once. I've read the first one, I think 2 or 3 times, and that's the one that definitely has the most like notes and scribbling in it too. And I've actually gifted two of those books to people close to me as well.
Mhm.
Whether or not they have actually read them, I am not
Yeah. Well,
entirely
thanks for
sure.
passing them on anyways too, because that's
Yeah. Well,
my
anyways,
intent.
I love that you gave the chance for me to talk to me today, and yeah, I actually found you via Ed Lattimore,
Mhm.
um, like I said 2 years ago, because I was following him, and then you just kept popping up on my timeline. And Ed always like puts out really great stuff, and I was like, man,
Yeah.
this guy is really interesting. And I try to like when I follow Twitter, I try to like keep it really like quality over quantity.
Mhm.
So and Rollo is basically the de facto head of the manosphere. People call you the
I'm not the
godfather of the man.
president, just put it that way, but yeah, I mean, let's just say that the my first book people consider kind of like the Bible of the manosphere. It's like pretty much what everybody reads, and I've gotten to the point where I think that even the guys who are my biggest detractors can't go through a podcast without quoting something that I've put in my books or some concept that I've been talking about for I'm going on 20 years now. So
Yeah, and I think the reason for that is because you get down to kind of the distilled, what I call like the distilled knowledge, basically the nitty gritty of it. Whereas a lot of guys will try to put their own kind of flavor on it and, to market it or whatever, which is part of the game, of course. But I feel like you approach it from a really academic point of view because you do have an undergrad in psychology
mhm.
and you have been writing other stuff as far as I know for a while, and you do have experience being a musician in LA, I believe it was,
Yeah.
and somewhat successful with that too as well. And that, of course, experience comes with groupies, or as you say, there's groupies for
Well,
every niche, right?
that's Royce actually.
Oh, it is Royce.
That's
Okay.
Royce. Yeah, I know it really gets mixed up here, but like, yeah, the idea that it when he said that it was in 16 Commandments of Poon, I think, is one of his seminal articles, and then the last one I think was play to your strengths, and that there are groupies for every male endeavor except for World of Warcraft. And they're probably and I would disagree with that. There probably are groupies for.
I also disagree. Yeah, yeah. I think it's pretty much every niche. There is some, and so Rollo basically, I don't know I guess I would describe him as an author in human psychology, an author in sociology, social dynamics.
Intersexual dynamics is what I call it. If
Mm,
you, it's really it's difficult to give anyone an elevator speech, certainly about what I do, but like also about like say the red pill in general, because the red pill is something that has evolved into something that it was really never about before. I've been involved in what we call the manosphere. I'm not really even sure I want to call it that anymore, but what's called the manosphere right now, really since about 2002. And I was a moderator on this forum called SoSuave, and that was during the time when there was the early pickup artists and Mystery Method, and it was all about game and PUA back then. I mean, like the real, like get down into the, go out in the field and come back with a field report and tell everybody how it went. And that's when everybody was sort of like, I for lack of a better term, refining their craft, I guess. And I was involved in all this at the time, and of course, had a real interest in behavioral psychology, and so I wanted to know why it was that what these guys were doing was working or it wasn't working. And so I was sort of picking it apart right there, because it was really I noticed a lot of parallels to the stuff that I was doing in school at that time. And so I got really, down into it, and a lot of the stuff that I put into the first book, and pretty much a lot of the things that I talk about, certainly the first year and a half of my blog, were all from discussions and debates and just interaction, like the marketplace of ideas, I guess. That was the manosphere back in the early 2000s and in the first part of the 20 teens, I guess. Things have changed a little bit. I think it's no secret that the manosphere isn't what it used to be. Red
Oh yeah,
pill.
even from when I started watching, it's crazy. Like I started or paying attention because when I followed Ed, he had like 10K, I think,
Mhm.
and you too. I've just seen you guys just keep growing and growing, which I think is great. And
Ed's a good dude. I came across Ed through a guy named Mark Baxter, and this was back in like 2016, I think. And Mark Baxter used to have a podcast, and he had Ed on there a few times. I listened to it, and I'm like, man, I got to get on there with Ed because I really want to talk to him because he still is a very interesting, very certainly a positive kind of guy.
mm,
And I would when at least in 2016, maybe now too, I would still call him certainly Red Pill. I think his direction has changed a bit, and a lot of people's directions have changed
of
since
course,
then. Some I would say for the better, some I would say for the worse. But I think that as we go forward, I think back, like I was saying, back in the day, in the pickup artist days, it was all about getting laid. Now it's about understanding the dynamics of getting laid. Now it's about intersexual dynamics. That's the elevator speech I was going to say is that I give guys is that I usually talk about the red pill from a perspective of intersexual dynamics, and I look at it as a praxeology, not an ideology, not even so. I mean, psychology is certainly a part of it, but you have to remember that there are so many aspects. There's so many fields of interest that sort of cover all of that. So there's evolutionary psychology, evolutionary biology, there's anthropology, there's sociology, there's psychology, there's a little bit of political science in there too. There's like everything that intersexual dynamics sort of covers goes into so many different branches that yeah, there you go. It's a study of human praxeology is a study of human behavior,
human action based on
action
the
based.
notion that humans engage in purposeful behavior as
There you go.
opposed to reflexive,
Yeah.
like
So that's
sneezing and unintentional behavior.
Yeah, so that's kind of like the direction. That's really, and people say, well, that's not what the red pill really is. And it's like, well, that's the way that I approach it. I approach it as kind of like a loose science. And a lot of people want to add their own sort of spin to it, whatever their outlook is, whatever their worldview is, whatever their belief set is, whatever their religion is, whatever their politics are, whatever, there's all these kind of what I call belief sets that come in and sort of color this. And I try to stay away from that. I try to just look at things from a very practical, objective perspective and understand why, like, what's the mechanics, like why do these things work, why do we do these things, and sometimes you have to ask really kind of bonehead questions like, well,
Yeah.
why everybody knows this, and we take it for granted that it's like it's common knowledge or it's common sense. Well, it's not common sense when you need to understand why it is that you even think that it's common sense in the first place. So when I started out, that was sort of my mission statement, was to be as amoral, I guess, and apolitical and aracial and a-religious as I possibly could, in order to understand those. I'm not looking for right or wrong, put it that way. I'm looking for what is. How does this thing work? How does the machine work? And then if people want to add their own, you want to make a judgment call after that, be my guest. But I'm going to be over here trying to figure out why the car runs or the TV set turns on when I press the button.
And you remind me, and I hope you, I think you will enjoy this this thought that I have in this opinion. I do think he's a better writer. I do think he's a much better writer. But your tone, your writing voice reminds me of Robert Greene a lot. And how
And
you,
that's intentional too.
yeah,
When I set out to write, well, actually, I shouldn't say, when I was writing the essays that would eventually go into The Rational Male, it's no secret that everybody in the old school PUA community, there were certain books you were supposed to read. One of those was, of course, 48 Laws of Power, Art of Seduction, maybe, The Red Queen, Selfish Gene. There's other ones that were.
so Red Queen is Matt Ridley, and Selfish Gene is Richard Dawkins.
Yes. And so people say, well, those guys are devout atheists. I'm like, yeah, they are, but they also understand the machine. They understand the mechanics of it. And again, it's like, I'm not trying to make value judgments based on this. All I'm doing is pointing out what is and what isn't. And sometimes you can't avoid that, because when you point out certain aspects, particularly when it's something as sensitive and as something as important as intersexual dynamics and as important as solving your reproductive problem, people invest a lot of their egos into that. They want they want what's supposed to be true to be true. And then when you ask the wrong questions, it's not even like I'm saying things are one way or the other. I'm just saying, have you thought about this? Have you connected these dots? Do you understand how the machine works? The fact that I would point that out means that I'm an evil son of a bitch. So.
Yeah, right. And I don't know, maybe you want to talk about this. Yeah, just because we're kind of going off the cuff here, that just popped into my head. There was when I was reading, because the first book that I read in this kind of sphere, which I don't even know, because I know you guys.
I don't know what to call it anymore.
Yeah, I don't know, because I don't, and depending on which fish you're talking to, he may get offended or whatever. But this area of knowledge and topic, basically, I started with the game. To be honest with you, and this is maybe a fundamental error. I still haven't read Mystery Method, but I started with the game, and then I got into your books, and I did read Robert Greene's my favorite author of all time. And I don't know if anybody is
up there, if not my most favorite one. He's definitely up there.
Yeah. So I don't know if anybody's going to take that, but yeah, Art of Seduction as well. And even like, which I know right now, if people are up to, I doubt any of my audience knows anything about you, small as it is right now. But there is like been quite a lot of drama going on the past, I would say, year or so in this sphere, whereas before it was a lot more amicable. And I think it's because it's just getting bigger. What would you say?
I would say that drama has always been there. It's just you're more aware of it. You're hyper aware of it right now because we have things like Twitter as being the place where everybody on planet Earth comes together to just like throw rocks at each other, more or less. I mean, that's really what it is. I mean, we are living in an unprecedented time of communication and technology, and things are on tap for us as human beings that have never been on tap for us as easily as they are right now. So when I like, it's funny because I like people like such as yourself or like whoever who are just sort of seeing this from like the third person position. They think that this is if I'm talking about like red pill grifters, or I'm talking about guys who I would say are purple pill rather than like being red pill or blue pill.
Or and you think Jordan Peterson is, you'd say?
I think that Jordan Peterson was in the right place at the right time. Again, facilitated by a technology and a time in human history where he could be who he is. Because remember you got to remember that Jordan Peterson, he's wrote a couple books before he did the 12 Rules for Life.
Yeah, Maps of Meaning.
Nobody even knew who his name was prior to like 2016. Nobody even knew who he was until he was made famous by refusing to use gender pronouns. Now suddenly he is like the father figure that the quote unquote Lost Boys generation never had. And I'm not saying that there's any, if you get value from Jordan Peterson, okay, but the only time I really pick apart Jordan Peterson or I am critical of him is when it comes to intersexual dynamics, because that's my wheelhouse. That's where I'm at. So when he talks about those things, like there's stuff that I absolutely agree with him about, but then he tends to focus primarily on one aspect of intersexual dynamics, which is like, you got to be a good father, you got to grow up, you got to be a good man, you got to you got to be a good husband, you got to negotiate with your wife. And he really kind of reverts back to what I would say is like blue pill thinking with respect to relationships. And so like, if you know anything about my work, I'm the first one who'll tell you that you can't negotiate genuine desire. He directly contradicts that and says, no, you need to negotiate and sit down with you need to marry a woman you can negotiate with. I mean, directly saying stuff like that. But there's other stuff that I agree with him about. And I think that he's probably on board with maybe 80% of probably the stuff that I would talk about. It's the other like 20% of what he talks about where I'm just kind of like, I lose the narrative with him, because to me, he was in the right place at the right time, found the right niche, and made a lot of money off of that by doing what he was doing. And now he's sort of fizzling out. And that is kind of the nature of the beast right now with respect to Twitter and online communities and being famous. It's no longer about being on TV or even being in the movies right now. I mean, you can go online and there are guys that, that are, I recognize by name that nobody in this neighborhood or nobody on TV would know. But there's a 500,000 to 1 million to maybe 5 million people who understand and know exactly who I would be talking about. And that's a different kind of fame. That's like a digital, like we call it famous.
Yeah, it's a niche fame
Yeah,
too,
it's a
because
niche thing. Yeah.
like niches aren't like people live all over the world. They don't live according to where they're what they're interested in.
Oh yeah.
So it's very different type of being known about, and in the fact that you're probably not going to be spotted necessarily, when you go out for
I
groceries or
hope
whatever.
not. I actually hope not. That's one of the beauty of being like doing what I do is, I mean,
Yeah,
I have yet to be like spotted on the street or in the gym or something. Hey man, you're Rollo Tomassi.
yeah.
Nobody's done that to me yet. I mean, I
Oh,
have, of course, when I was doing certain conferences and things like that. But I'm in a place that's sort of primed to look for a guy like me. But I've never been like spotted on the street or anything, and that's by design. I don't want to be spotted on the street.
no, yeah, definitely, definitely. And I used to when I was younger, just because I don't know if that's something that all young people go through or what. But now I'm just like, yo, like I don't know. I just every day, the older I get, the less I just view
Mhm.
celebrities with any sort of admiration. Like
Well,
like
I'm not a,
during this
I'm not a
crisis.
performer. You know,
Yeah.
I'm glad you asked that too, because I don't think anybody's ever like brought this up with me. I'm not a performer. I'm not here to entertain. I'm here to
Mm,
educate. And I think that maybe, talking about Jordan Peterson, I think he sort of crossed that line. He went from being an educator to being an entertainer. And that might be something that he wasn't really ready for. Like when we talk about Peterson and when he, like recently, he's been being treated in, I guess, in Russia for like drug abuse or like prescription med. Like he's trying to get off of like antidepressants or something.
is
I
he
don't
an
know what
addict?
I probably I can't imagine he would. He well, I mean, he's in a treatment for a rehab to get off of certain drugs. So yeah, I guess
Yeah,
is he addicted to certain things? I would say so. But
something.
why did he get to that point? And that goes back to the point you were just making a second ago. Is that um, right now the internet as what it is today, you can become famous and you can become sort of almost like we talk about with Jordan Peterson. He's a rock star. He's suddenly a rock star. He's
Yeah.
selling out all of these halls and everything. You got a guy who went from teaching in a classroom in Montreal or Toronto, I don't know where, Ontario, wherever he was,
Yeah, I think he
to
was
selling
Toronto.
out, yeah, to selling out like 10,000 seat halls
Yeah.
in Melbourne, Australia. And you're probably familiar with this concept. It's called too much, too young, too fast. Have you heard of that before? It's like
Mm,
when you get a kid who's like the star athlete and he gets signed to the NFL and he's now suddenly the running back for whatever team, right? And they pay him like millions of dollars and he goes from being like really sort of this kid who doesn't have a father or whatever, he doesn't know what to do with himself, and then he goes from being like sort of poverty stricken to having millions of dollars,
immense power.
becoming, yeah, immense power, immense fame, instant recognition, and all this stuff. And it's too young, too much, too fast.
Yeah,
The
can't handle it.
same thing can happen to you online right now. And I
Oh,
think
yeah.
that's really what you want to know why Peterson is recovering from his addictions, whatever it is. It's because too much, too
The
young.
fame. Yeah.
He's not too young. It's just that he's too young in the sense that he didn't know what he was getting himself into.
Experience-wise. Yeah, I mean, but I feel like there's very few people who can, are equipped to deal with that sort of sudden, rush of fame or change in lifestyle, really, because your whole life changes, your relationships with people and how
And
people view
how much
you.
did he have been making as a teacher? I mean, granted, he's got a doctorate. He's Dr. Jordan Peterson, right? So he was making some money for sure, but he
Oh, yeah.
wasn't making like at one point, like he had to take his Patreon private because he was making something like $80,000 or $100,000 a month on Patreon. So you go from maybe making $80,000 a year as a faculty member or whatever call it. Maybe it's okay. So maybe it's $120,000 a year to making $80,000 a month.
You know
That,
what this reminds me of? And I never really thought about it in this terms before. And I'm going to compare him to this other man, and people have done it before, but it's for a very different reason. I think he's a great man. I think he has good intentions. I don't agree with. I think he's a little too sexually conservative for me, which maybe is related to what you were saying about how he has this thing with negotiating and stuff. And another thing too is like his wife. They were like grew up on the same street. Um, but he reminds me, or just the phenomenon of him coming to rising to fame, he reminds me of Hitler in the sense that they were both kind of feeling a subconscious, like ideological need for the populace, almost um, one that the populace was unaware of.
Well, you've probably heard the term like, and this is like really goofy, Eastern philosophy, but like when the student is ready, the teacher
The
will
teacher
appear,
will appear.
right? When the populace is ready, the dictator will appear.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing. Or like when the niche is ready, somebody's going to fall into it, and hopefully that person is prepared to do that rather than be like sort of like the grifter or the guy who's just sort of there to tell people what they want to hear and then move on. I've really kind of had to um, I have a lot of guys, like you were just saying before in the beginning here, there's a lot of guys who will use my work as sort of their springboard to their own kind of brand of me. And they're trying
Yeah, man, it's getting really like I saw this tweet the other day. It was I should have saved it, but he said something to the effect of, "Don't say I love you after a coffee date, or she will know that you won't walk away." And like there's like people that liked it, like dozens. I'm like, dude, who does this? Like, people need to be told this. Like,
Well, it's straight out of, and it's funny. It's like if I were to say that, people would go, "Oh, you stole that from Royce," and I'd be like, "Yeah, I did because I've been a part of it for a very long time." But that's like a lot. We're now in a generational shift, I think, in the red pill, and we're also in a technological shift. So we're seeing this next generation of guys coming into red pill understanding, and I've seen this happen twice before because, like I said, I've been doing this since about 2002. And so the guys that I knew back in 2002, there are very few guys that I know from back before I even had a blog who are still in this in some way. But I've watched sort of generational shifts and sort of pivots and messages throughout. I would say at least 3 times in the last 20 years. And we're at that point right now too. So what happens is guys will go on YouTube and they'll find like a red pill guru, and all that dude is doing is basically reading from my material, or
regurgitating.
he's pulling it from Royce's old stuff, or he's pulling it from Rush's, so what's left of Rush's stuff, or else
It's a Rush in a second, but
or else they're taking old material, repackaging it, and calling it their own. But the problem that I run into with these guys, I think that the red pill should be open source, but the problem is that in making it open source, you also open yourself up to sort of corruption of
people politicize it, right?
Well, they politicize it, but they also commercialize it, because what I see happening is probably the same thing that you were talking about there before, is like guys will come up and they'll make these like quick hit videos, like about 10-minute videos, and they'll hit on an old school red pill principle, but then they'll bastardize it because they know that their audience wants to feel something. They want red meat. I call it red meat for the red pill, right? And so what they do is they don't go into any kind of depth to help guys understand. It's like junk food, right? It's like it tastes good and you really want it, but when you're done eating it and it doesn't fill you up, there's no nutritional value.
And in 20 years, like it's gonna hate you.
Well, and a lot of guys do that because it's an easy, quick way to get subs on YouTube or followers on Twitter or whatever. You just be as outrageous as you want. And then what happens after that is I get all these guys who say, well, Rollo said that women can't love men or something. And I'm like, no, that's absolutely not what I've spent probably the last like 6 or 7 years explaining why that's true. But they don't care because it's a new generation and they're not getting the information directly from me. They're getting it from some dude that started his YouTube channel or his blog or his book or whatever it is, a year and a half ago. And now he's huge because he's giving them red meat. He's giving them stuff that they want, that makes them feel like indignation. It makes them feel like their pain and their commiseration, I guess is maybe the word I'm looking for. They want to know that there's somebody out there who's like patting him on the back and saying, yeah, you're right. Yeah. And without really explaining the concept in any kind of depth, because they don't want to. That we live in the TLDR generation, right? Too long, right? That's where we're at right now. And people don't want it. They don't want to read a book.
Oh no, it's crazy, man. Just a quick thought. I have a couple people who I've just been standing in rooms with. They're watching Netflix, and they have like English subtitles on, and I'm like, yo, why do you have the subtitles on? Like the only time I ever have subtitles on is to help me learn another language. And this dude's answer was because he doesn't read and he wants to read more. I'm like, dude, come on. Open up a book, like watching a TV show to read. That's like, you might as well be in preschool.
My blog was once got right around the 2016. I was reaching over 500,000 guys a month with my blog. It's fallen off quite a bit like these days. And
Really?
that's
Oh,
primarily,
because of this crisis that we're
well,
in?
not so much this crisis, but because guys don't read anymore. They don't want to read. They would rather, like, I sell way more audiobooks than I do books because guys want to listen to this stuff. They want to be at the gym and they want to listen to like what's in the Rational Mail or what's, they would I've guys, like, I'll do a live stream. I do 2 live
In
streams.
the gym.
Yeah.
Got that lat back look there.
Yeah.
For
I do 2 live streams per week. And usually they go for right around 2 hours. And the first thing guys say is like, can you dice these up? Can you put them into audio form? So, because I can't sit there and listen to this whole thing. It's so, like I said, it's the TLDR generation. So even like, as much as I would like to say, I love my book, I put a lot of energy and effort and art and creativity and everything I can into formatting my books and making them as, crafting my books as much as I possibly can. But at the end of the day, guys want to listen to it. Guys want to, because it's an easier medium for them to sort of digest it.
Definitely.
And then what happens after that is, like, I can go write a 2000 word essay. For me is like average, maybe even a little bit more than that these days, because I dig into these topics. They're not, what I go into is not simple stuff. It's not red meat for the red pill. It is like, here's, it's well thought out. And I'm, not to pat myself on the back too much, but like I go into a lot of detail and I cover a lot of what I think will be the common critiques of whatever topic it is that I'm talking about. And I go into a lot of depth there, but like, people, they don't know, guys don't want to read. They don't care about that. They want to listen to it, and they want to have reassurance and reaffirming of what it is that they're seeing. And they're not looking for solutions. They're looking for commiseration these days. And I really think that a lot of this has to do with the fact that we've changed. We, as a society, as a Western globalized society right now, we're online. We're doing this. You and I are doing this right now on StreamYard, right?
Yeah.
We're talking live in real time. I think probably people would rather me spend more time talking to them direct or doing stuff like this than really writing stuff out. But that's not how I work. I've never worked that way. I have to write.
I mean, you can definitely do that. And you're consulting right now. You're
when I can. I do it on a by-need basis. And because I've been working on my 4th book right now, I've been really focusing on that. So I haven't done too much counseling lately. I probably will, once I send it off for final edits, I'll probably get back into counseling a little bit more. But again, I'm not a coach. I've never called myself a coach. I'm not a life coach. I'm not going to, I can give you analysis. Like when guys come to me and they say, "Oh, I get my girlfriend back." I like, tell me the story and I'll tell you why I think you're doing what you're doing. But I'm not the guy that's going to give you 12 rules for life. I'm not the guy that's going to give you a prescription that's going to or the formula to live this perfect, great life. I'm going to give you tools so that you can build your own life. And then please come back and show me what you built. I'd love to see that. But and I think that's probably the best way to go about it. But like, I'm not a coach and I don't make a living off of, I mean, if you want to pay me for it, great. But it's not like something that I do for a living, but I will do it. But I think you're right. I find that a lot of people really want that one-on-one. They want to talk.
And I think that demand is there too, is because, and related to what we're talking about in terms of podcasts and audio formats being so popular, not only can you, do other stuff while you listen to them, but the knowledge is often, it's like always contextual, right? It doesn't always apply. There's usually always an exception, with the exception of, hard science.
I mean, I have a pretty broad knowledge base. Like, my critics will usually come from one of 2 angles. The first one is, you've been married for almost 24 years. You don't know jack about this sexual marketplace, blah, blah, blah. But they just presume that because I've been married, that therefore I'm a bad MGTOW or something. I've never been a MGTOW, period. But like, they presume that they try to poison the well is what they try to do. Yeah. They try to say, well, he doesn't know what he's talking about because he's not one of us. It's very that's another thing that's happened right now, is with the opening of like new communication and new social media.
Factions everywhere.
Very factionalized, very tribal.
Yeah.
And so that's why you get like MGTOWs, I find, are very, very tribal. Black pill guys, very tribal. And and they want to say, well, the red pill is a cult. And it's like, well, no, it's a praxology, and I'm sticking to that. I'm not a PUA. Of course, that's what they want to make you.
Yeah, because then they can call you a misogynist.
Yeah, well, so these guys will say, well, he doesn't know what he's talking about because he's married and therefore he's not out in the field and he's not doing well. First of all, I've been working in the liquor industry for almost 25 years now. So I'm even though I have been married, I'm out in the field and I see what's going on. I've been involved in what I've been doing for almost 20 years now.
Right.
And writing about it and everything else. And the other thing, and then on the opposite side is then I'll get guys who listen to what I talk about, and they approach the manosphere or the red pill from a much more patriarchal, much more traditional,
yeah,
that side of things. And then they'll say, well, that Rollo Tomassi, all he wants you to do is just go get laid with as many girls as you possibly can. So it's like either I don't have any credibility because I'm married, or I don't have any credibility because
you're a Tate or something like that.
Yeah, suddenly I'm Tate. Yeah,
yeah, right. And there's no nuance.
They don't. Well, and there's not going to be, because they deliberately misunderstand what it is that I talk about. Because when I talk about something that doesn't align with whatever their belief is on either side, whatever it is, then they go, well, you shouldn't listen to him because X, Y, and Z or whatever. It doesn't align with my belief set. But the problem is they don't really, they want to attack my character, or they want to, like I said, poison the well, rather than deal with what it is that I'm actually saying. Because if they did that, it would point out the flaw in what it is that they're doing, which of course is their brand of me. Right. Now, MGTOW have brand of me, Tradcons have brand of me, MRAs have brand of me, even PUAs have brand. Everybody is you're your own brand, Addie. You're your own brand right now. You're interested in promoting yourself, and you got your channel and everything. And ain't nothing wrong with that. But when that brand of me conflicts with the message that you're supposed to be all about, then you find out. I think right now, because of this crisis and everything right now, we're going to find out what people are really all about right now.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Where they are
the manosphere isn't me, or is besides you and AJ and Ed, and the AJ saying some stuff that I don't necessarily agree with some stuff he's saying right now. It just seems crickets to me, doesn't it? It seems like everybody's just like not
got their head down right now, because
everyone's scared, dude, and like nobody's admitting it really.
Well, and then the reason for that is because a lot of these guys got, particularly on the Tradcon side of things, but also sort of on the goofy new age crystal, bake your asshole, side of things. They got into doing what they're doing because it paid off better than their old cubicle job. So they quit their old cubicle job and they said, I'm going to be a coach. And the reason they can do that is because for the last, really, I would say since 2012, the barrier to entry to call yourself a coach of any flavor, whether you're a life coach, a dating coach, a relationship expert. I've never called myself any of them. I'm just Rollo Tomassi, and you're going to read my book and you want to talk about what I talk about. I've been doing this for 20 years, and
it's not like you're just like, oh, this is popping off right now, I'm going to go take advantage. No, like you've had interest in this since you were little, and you also have the life experience to back it up too. Another thing too is like, I like these Tradcon guys. I do think they share some good stuff on Twitter, but some of them need to not give me advice about women. I'm like, I'll just leave it at that.
Well, I can point out the fact that a lot of these guys either they've got some skeletons in their closet, as with their relationships with what a lot of these guys who you want to see as like sort of traditional conservatives, or these guys who are worry the new neo patriarchs, right? The guys who want to save the West because they so the red pill's great up until it's about getting laid, right? Then they have a problem with it. And then of course the opposite side is, then you got MGTOW, then you got PUA, then you got all this other stuff that's going on. And every one of those guys is their own brand. Well, when one brand has some kind of message that conflicts with the other brand, then what's going to happen? You're going to attack that guy, or you're going to try to find some way to devalue what it is that they're saying. It's not about objectivism. It's about like what is best for their brand. And so that's why these guys get really invested in their brands, because like I can't even remember I can't even count how many like pinnacle of a man, apex of a man, mighty mountain men of Mars. I don't know, like it's like if you can find some sort of virtuous adjective and put man after it, that's their group, right? That's and to me, all that is just like trying to cordon off part of the manosphere. Like Roosh did the same thing back in 2015. He tried to do neo-masculinity and sort of cordon off his own little part of the
his
manosphere.
own philosophical niche in within
and he did that. He was, I'll give him this, he was a trailblazer back in 2015 because everybody who came after him did the same damn thing.
Well, that's what innovators do, you know.
Yeah, well, they're trying to hold, they're trying to create their own niche market. And the problem is it's more, their messaging then becomes more about advertising and brand identity and everything else, rather than what the truth is really about, what the message really has been for a long time. I wrote an essay almost a year ago, like in May, it'll be a year ago. And it was called False Positives. And what I meant by that is that there's a fine line between, seeking truth or looking for objective truth, and then the hustle. And everybody wants the hustle. It's truth versus hustle. So we go, yeah, well, he might be full of shit, but you got to respect the hustle. Well, yeah, up to a point, until that hustle is like costing men their lives. Then it's not about the hustle anymore, asshat. It's about truth. So, and that's why I wrote that there, because it seemed to me at that time, and it still does today, and I think I've been pretty much vindicated by this, is that a lot of the guys that are out there putting their brand identity out there, putting themselves as the brand of whatever, they don't have any real interest in helping guys or bettering men's lives. They say they do. That's really what you're supposed to say, right? That's the product. And it's about product placement. It's about putting product out there. It's about putting, this, my brand, my little, tribe kind of thing as their own brand. And it's whatever is in the best interest of that brand. So what is the hustle? The hustle is the only thing. And so as a result, sometimes the truth suffers because you put too much hustle.
Definitely, man. And that's a huge problem. 2 points in the media in general these days. But also, I think the reason Rollo's so passionate about this particular point that he's making is because not only the fact that it's his livelihood, but also his brother-in-law basically was a catalyst in this.
That
you
was.
Want to just shortly go into that? You don't have
to.
That
was in 2003, and like, okay, so what guys always ask me is like, whenever I go on a new, particularly the guys that are new to the manosphere, or guys who are uninitiated or unfamiliar with like my work or any of this whole online mess, they'll ask me this. They'll say, "What was it that made you who you are?" They always presume that there's like I'm some bitter, burned, misogynistic guy. Some like, "Oh man, when I was 16, the girl said she was going to go to the dance with me and she didn't." So I dedicated my life.
That's what they always say, right? Is who hurt you? Right?
There's nothing. I've been happily married for going on 24 years. I have a daughter who's about to turn 22. I have what most guys would think of as a pretty ideal marriage and relationship, and I've been pretty successful with women for most of my life. I have a lot of experience over the years of dealing with like being blue pill, being alpha, being beta. I had to deal with a borderline personality disordered girlfriend. I've been in other long-term relationships. I've been in the relationship I've been in. I've raised a female from infancy to adulthood. So, I've got a lot of things that I can talk about. But when people always, they say, well, when did you get red pilled, as if it's a verb, right? Well, back in
or like a one-time binary switch.
Yeah. And so like, that's why the reason why I usually don't talk about stuff like this is because, that people will go, aha, I got him. That's when it was. It was because of this. It was because of that. And then they go, okay, forget it. I'm not going to listen to anything he has to say because he got burned or something hurt him at one point. It's like, you know what? Everybody has had something like that happen to them. But my brother-in-law ended up killing himself in 2003, and as a result of my sister-in-law basically divorcing him after about 20 years of marriage. And it was at that point that I kind of woke up a little bit as to like what the sisterhood was really about. If anybody reads my tweets or anything, I talk about the sisterhood uber alles. But just sort of, it woke me up to how intersexual dynamics and how not understanding them in a modern context can be life endangering.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I want to get into this too, because when you look at the Middle East in countries where polygamy is the norm, I guess. There's a lot more violence, and because it's zero sum, right? And even if this is another thing I want to get into, even if we, you know, do somehow, you know, have it, which is what we have now. It's what we're seeing, right? It's like it's supposed to be monogamy, but it's not really, you know, and it's not completely zero sum, but it's tilted that way.
Human beings are not monogamous. Most, if you, it's a really great book. This really great book. It's called Promiscuity by Tim Berkhead. Read this book, and you will understand that monogamy in the animal kingdom is an exceptional rarity.
Usually it's only birds that I've read, and packs of wolves.
Yeah. And so like and certainly not primates. Let's just be honest here.
Yeah, and I'm not a biologist or an expert. I'm sure there's more animals that are out there like that. But yeah, like something like 90% of mammals have an alpha male and are polygynous by nature.
Cuckoldry is a mating strategy that is almost universal to the animal kingdom right now. And I'm not saying that there aren't species that are actually monogamous, but very few of them are. And the ones that are tend to be that way either by choice or by environmental conditions. And so when we talk about monogamy versus like say polygamy or whatever, you kind of have to understand like it's in human beings' best interest that a man and a woman come together, they have a child, they have that kid, and they invest themselves into that kid based on a few social contracts really is what they are. Basically, if a guy has sex with a woman and the woman has his baby, that's the deal. I'll be parentally invested in this child as long as I know that child is my baby. Great. Well, that might not be in the best interest of the woman, and it might be a better interest for her to mate with some other guy and then trick you into thinking that this is your baby and you need to invest yourself into it because you're a better dad than the cad that I had sex with. And so there's that. For me to say that, people go, well, we're not all animals and we're not. I'm like, yeah, I understand that. I understand personal responsibility and I understand personal choice. I'm looking at the mechanics of this. I'm looking at what's under the hood in all of this. And so what's under the hood is that it is in human beings' best interests to invest in their offspring because our offspring are weak and vulnerable and are not self-sufficient for quite some time. And women, human females, are weak and vulnerable for quite some time, particularly when they have to gestate a child for nine months.
Yeah.
They need support. And there's all kinds of
During the Spanish flu, if a pregnant woman got it, 100% death rate for pregnant women.
Yeah. So there is the evolutionary aspect of the need. Like cuckoldry is an efficient mating strategy for women in parental investment. Monogamy is a behavioral mating strategy that is in the best interest of human beings. That's not that we're innately monogamous. It's that we condition ourselves and train ourselves to be that way, because if we don't behave that way, our species dies off. So
could you explain that?
Well, we're innately
by die off. Oh, you mean die off by just
die off because we have. Well, I mean, it takes a man and a woman. We are complementary. We evolved to be complementary to one another, and we evolved really to invest ourselves into the child. Hopefully, it's your child, and to raise that child from helpless infancy to self-sufficiency of some sort. Now, we say that that's 18 years old. That's ridiculous now, because usually it might have been 7 years old back in our evolutionary past where the kid could learn to hunt and be self-sufficient. Well, as a result of that, maybe monogamy didn't last all that long in our ancestral past. I don't know. Well, who knows? The point of it is that that promiscuity and cuckoldry and polygamy, or polyamory, I guess, for lack of a better term, are really our innate mating strategies, but we have to sort of sublimate those in order and learn behaviors and through society, through social conditioning, whatever, to become monogamous, which is in our collective best interests. Because if we don't do that, if we don't form families, if we don't come together and the man is the man and the woman is the woman, and we have conventional gender roles, if we don't do those things, our chances, our prospects for survival are lessened as a result of that. Well, at least from our evolutionary past, they were. So monogamy is a great idea, but you have to understand it's not innate. It's something that we have to learn. It's something that we have to sublimate certain parts of us. There's certain reproductive trade-offs that we have to make in order to make sure our kid goes on to the next generation, that he survives, like he learns how to hunt. So he learns how to kill a saber-toothed tiger, whatever, to defend himself, to protect, and to be that conventionally masculine man later, or that conventionally feminine woman later, so that they can also do the same thing, come together, be complements to one another, and start the next generation and go on from there. It's not that we're innately monogamous, it's that we learn it, and we have to be a part of that. And if we don't, then we have a less chance for survival. So it's really in men's innate interest to spread the seed, to go out and really, be a player, and unlimited access to unlimited sexuality. For women, their innate strategy is hypergamy. So it's alpha seed and beta need. They need the highest quality guy who's going to be not only is he going to be a fun in the sack, but he also has to be able to kill other guys. He also has to be able to protect her from dangers. He also has to be willing to share his resources. He also has to be a good provider. He also has to be there's a lot more that's really required for men conventionally for men than there is really for women. But that's in their innate best interests to look for the conventionally masculine guy like that, the best that they can get. And if they can't find it in one guy, they're okay with getting it from two guys, because that is what is in their best interest. Now,
and I read that, actually, I think it was from you, that birds do this, that female birds will actually do the same thing. They'll get one male bird. I can't remember what species. One male bird for the egg, right? And then one who just brings them food and brings the baby.
Right. That's where we get the term cuckold from. We also, you'll see that in primates as well, like in gorillas and chimps, in bonobos, even macaques, even the smaller primates. They do pretty much the same thing. There is usually one, and some, depending on the species, sometimes two dominant alpha males that dominate the reproductive side of that whole troop or that tribe. Really, it becomes very, very tribal. They tend to protect a harem of females that they reproduce with, and then eventually that guy gets that alpha male gets old or weak or whatever, and is challenged, and he's either killed or he's run off.
Yeah.
And now that the ownership of that tribe goes to the next most dominant guy. And so,
and cats too, like lions will do this, which is interesting because they're usually not social, but yeah, it's interesting watching
again,
lions.
it's like, so people, when I say stuff like, I think one of the reasons why people have such a problem with like evolutionary psychology or evo bio or even evolutionary anthropology is, it seems like if you get into the mechanics of it, it seems, first of all, it seems very deterministic. And then it also seems like, well, those are animals and we're above that. We're not animals. And
there's an ego thing involved.
Yeah, well, there is, but like it becomes an issue of whether it's right or it's wrong. And I think infanticide for human beings is definitely wrong, but it's probably something that's innate to us because of our ancestral pattern. So that's why you see like step parents and the boyfriend that mommy gets after she kicks out daddy, it tends to be like, was it 8 to 10 times more likely to abuse the child, the existing child right there. That sort of coincides, if there was going to be some sort of behavioral parallel, that coincides with infanticide in, like, say, lion, big cats, and in primates too, because that's what they do. They kill off the offspring,
clean house. That's what they
clean house, and as a result, it sends the females into estrus, and he reproduces with them. It's ugly, like from we're appalled by it because it seems like immoral and it seems like the wrong thing, but it's the right thing in terms of suspending and perpetuating the species. So when we see infanticide, we're horrified by it, but that's probably part of our innate, nature.
Yeah, definitely. And not only because of our maybe human nature, but just like, look at this pandemic, like it's making people realize how fragile we are, how fragile life can be. And during the height of the Black Death, like life became so cheap. It was like every faction for themselves,
Yeah, there's nothing you could do about it. When you're faced with an environmental reality, that you change your mind about things. I've said this before, and if you've read my first book, you probably are familiar with the war brides dynamic. And the war brides dynamic is, and proposed the idea that nature selected for women who could push past the feelings of attachment and push past the feelings of like any emotional connection that they had
Yeah, I
with,
think
like,
I know where you're going with this.
like a prior mate or with
Yeah.
their children as well. Very similar to how, like, when a rival alpha male comes into a primate group, kills off that alpha male and takes over the tribe and kills off all the offspring. The females still have to survive somehow. Well, how do they do that? Well, the ones that can accept that are the ones that pass their genes on into the next generation. That's ugly, but that's the reality of it. And I think something similar happens to women. That's so, like, when a warring tribe comes in and it kills off all the men folk, and you can see examples of this in the Bible, in the Torah, Quran.
World War II. That's what the Nazis did.
II.
They would kill the men and then
Leave the women.
enslave the children, rape the women occasionally, and the Soviets did this too. Or they would just kill them and take them as slaves.
Right. And so we say that's immoral, and yeah, it is. But the thing is that over the course of evolutionary history, women had to be resilient enough to let go of the guy that they were, unless the guy was like super alpha and she's ready to, like, just die for the guy. There's not too many women that are really willing to do that. I think it was Joe Rogan said something like, what was it?
Oh, I saw that. You wrote it, man. I was gonna bring it up.
Disposable. It was like Joe Rogan said, guys will strap a bomb to their chest for the very unlikely idea that they're going to get laid, they're going to get ass in another dimension. Like, they'll happily go to the grave thinking they're going to get 70 virgins, whereas a woman will never do that.
Yeah, no woman would ever
do that for a penis. No way.
Well, it's like some guys, they don't.
Funny, but
to them, it seems like they don't have an option, and it's women. It's like, why would when you think about it, why would they ever do that? They have all the options.
Well, and then that's also sort of a species. Psychological, it's what I call evolved mental firmware, in that it's something that is, I think, unique to successfully reproducing females, is that they had to develop an evolved mental firmware that would allow them to fall in love with their captors, to adjust to
Stockholm Syndrome.
Stockholm Syndrome is much more common amongst women than it is amongst men. And why is that? Well, because if you think about it, they had to do that because in our evolutionary path, if a tribe came in and wiped out the men folk, killed off all the babies, then they were there. And if they were breeding age women, they would become war brides, right? That was the spoils of war. Whatever was left over, and the women, that was for the conquering tribe. You do that over countless centuries, and yeah, you're going to have a species of women who are going to want to have an easier time letting go of a romantic partner.
And it's not because out of any ethical or moral decision or emotional. It's completely pragmatic. It's completely for survival.
Nature doesn't care about how things get done. It's just that they get things done. It's like one of the jokes that I talk about with Ryan is, if it's all about the babies, it doesn't matter how the babies are born. It doesn't matter what the context or the conditioning or what led up to the babies being born. They just got to be born.
And we're seeing that with this virus, which has a very high degree of replicability. All it wants to do is just multiply,
Doesn't matter. That's all it's about. And it's a machine, right? That's why I keep saying we need to look at the machine.
An army. It's coming.
And, I mean, I'm not trying to devalue the idea that we need to know right from wrong and we should be immoral, sons of bitches. I'm not saying that at all, but I don't think that if that is our primary focus on things, we will never understand the machine and we'll keep making the same mistakes.
Yeah. And what I don't like is the straw man arguments that people always used, which is they refute a point that you don't even make because they're not listening, right?
Oh, but usually what happens when I get that from people, it's usually from women too. They think they're refuting a point, but they don't refute the point. They just try to present the opposite case of it. Well, so if I illustrate some very unflattering truth about women, it's usually women, because if I say men's nature is this and boy is, like, just me like connecting dots. I don't even say, Oh, you will never hear me say, "Oh, I think guys in general are asshats, or guys are just are horrible and evil because it's their nature to be evil." I would never say anything like that. I'll point out the dynamic. I will observe why we do what we do, or what the latent purpose is of whatever our behaviors are. I'll be happy to get into that. But just me illustrating that, just by my even saying that, there is a certain mindset of people who are believers, right? And they think that because I said that, that it automatically implies that I'm saying right and wrong. I'm making a judgment call, and I'm not making a judgment call. I'm making an observation. But
Right.
there is a mentality that will always say their first reflexive default response is you're making a right or wrong call. And
Yeah. It's black and white thinking.
if they can't refute it, they'll try to find the opposite, something that is like the equal and opposite reaction in the opposite sex.
Yeah.
So if I go and I say, well, girls, women, I just said this recently too in a tweet. And I said, somebody sent me this, I think it was an Instagram or whatever, like right now, because of the COVID thing and all that.
Yeah.
Girls are going online and discovering that they can make money by showing their ass.
Oh my gosh, dude.
They're becoming like cam whores overnight, right?
Yeah.
And so if I go and I say that, and we go and we observe this, just by me, even if I retweeted it, like women would be like, well, if guys didn't really want that, then women wouldn't do that. I'm like, I just retweeted something. I didn't say anything about. I didn't make a judgment. I just said, look at what's happening here.
Yeah.
Or I said this as I retweeted it, and I said that, and this is true, that going forward in the future, women will no longer be able to escape their digital footprint. So because the internet never forgets, at least as long as we have the internet's never going to forget. And if you decide right now at 18 years old that you want to go and show your cooter off on Instagram or wherever it is, you want to be a cam whore or whatever, or let's not call you a cam whore. Let's call you a Instagram model or an influencer or whatever, where you show sexy pictures of yourself. I can euphemize and give you all the different tones that make you feel comfortable. The fact of the matter is this is what you've decided to do. And in the future, you will not be able to escape that. So what I said is that because of this, women and the gynocentric social order will have to condition men to accept that. They will say, well, there's nothing wrong with that. She's being sexual. That's okay. It's her journey of self-discovery. She's supposed to be able to do that. Why? The problem is really with you, mister, because if you have a problem with that, then you must be insecure in your masculinity. And so it's the shaming tactic that comes and all this other crap that goes along with it. I was typing out one very short, I didn't even use all 280 characters. I just said that, what will happen is that society, that feminine primary society, will have to train men to accept women's sexual past. And they're already doing that. They've been doing it for a long time. That's
like you're evil or a jerk because you have a standard or something.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is men are not going forward. Men will not be allowed to have standards for women. We're already there right now, but I think like particularly after a post-virus world, when women go online to because for whatever reason, attention, money, sexuality, whatever, maybe they're advertising for a guy to come and marry them. I don't know whatever their intent is. The fact of the matter is that they're not going to be able to escape that. And so in order to sort of put off men's innate interest in finding a partner who is going to have his paternal interests in mind when they come together, like we were just saying, become complements to one another, that guy is going to have to accept the fact that this is what she did. So how do we do that? Well, we engineer the next generation of guys to accept that just by default.
Do you think there's a bigger plan at work here?
You mean as far as what?
Do you think there are politicians who are pushing forth radical feminism and liberalism with a bigger plan?
Oh, well, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
what would the plan be?
Well, here's the thing is I don't think that there's so much a plan. Like when everybody asks me this, it always gets back down to like, oh, do you think there's some Illuminati, or do you think there's some evil cabal, satanic cabal, or baby eaters sacrificing babies to golden idols or whatever, whatever, choose your ethnicity, and there's the problem, right? I always ask them that too, is like, say, what's the end? Like, even if there was a cabal, what do they want? What is their idealized state?
Okay. Do you want me to give you a possibility or?
I mean, I don't care. I see what the
Yeah.
thing is like when I hear stuff like that, it's usually because people want to believe that a certain faction, whoever that's a certain tribe. Remember, we're talking about human beings are innately tribal, so we're always going to look for another tribe to blame for whatever it is that's going on around us. There's always going to be another tribe that we have to either defend against or we have to attack.
We're defined almost exclusively by our enemies, aren't we?
Yes. I also would also say that we're defined by the mechanics of what makes us, what builds us up, and by our environment as well. So yeah, as part of our environment, there are opposing factions. There's conflict that we're always going to have. We're human beings. That's what we are. We deal in conflict. We deal in tribalism, and so when guys say, well, is there like some unitary Illuminati kind of thing that's going on in the background? I go, well, first of all, I don't think so. But then even if there was, what's their ultimate goal? What would, like, if there was some evil empire, or like some evil cabal of guys that were like plotting all of this over the course of time, and now finally their evil plans have come to fruition. I mean, first of all, that's very melodramatic.
Are you talking about COVID in particular?
Well, COVID, it could be feminism. I heard I have had people say that feminism is a communist plot, or it's Chinese people trying to overthrow Western
Chinese.
Or
I don't know about that, but I
it?
could see it being communism. I mean,
Marxism, social Marxism. That's why SJWs are so popular right now, and it got into the schools and everything. It's like, yeah, okay, but like, or people will say that feminism was started by the Rockefellers, and it was meant to destabilize Western society. And like, okay, but to what end? To give them more money? To give them, total control of the world? Okay, great. You got total control of the world. What do you do with it then? What's the ultimate plan? Right? To wipe everybody out and just live happily ever after. Like, tell me what you think the whole plan is.
I think a possibility
like, nobody has any real answers when it comes to
that. Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying I do, but I do think a possibility is, and again, going back to World War II and Nazi Germany again, Hitler said something to the effect of remove the women, remove the men from the house, make the women and children dependent on the state. And feminism, I think, highly encourages that, in addition to encouraging women to not only go to university, but enter the workforce and be in the workforce longer. So I do, whether it's communism or something else, I don't know, but it does make it easier for an authoritarian state.
Okay.
I think
so. You are describing a technique and a methodology. And I'll tell you why I know this. There's a really great book. I don't know if you've read it yet, but it's a really great book. It's by Dr. Hector Garcia, and it's called Alpha God.
Oh, I've been seeing you. You've been raving about this recently, haven't you, been, Rollo?
Fantastic book. I don't like his conclusions, but his analysis is spot on, I think. Now, in that book, he describes how the Catholic Church, when the Spanish conquest of the New World, like in South America, came across, and they were sort of dominating the indigenous tribes, like the Incas, and the Cortez, and like the conquistadors, right? They come over and they establish Catholicism in the New World. One of the ways that they repressed the indigenous populations there, the first thing they did was attack the males. They had to emasculate the males, and literally, in some cases, like pull their dicks off, and to turn the masculine men into women, and to make the conquering tribe, which was the Spaniards at that time, and the conquering religion had to take over. The first way that they did that is exactly what you described about the Nazis, or about the communism, or whatever. It's attack conventional masculinity. Why is that? Because those are the guys, conventionally masculine men are going to be your biggest opposition.
Oh yeah, those are the most powerful members of society.
So how do you, so that's the first place you start, is emasculating the male, the dominant masculine, conventionally masculine male population of whatever it is. And we did the same thing to the Indians. We did the same thing we do it throughout history. And it's not just the Nazis that did it. It was a Catholic Church that did it in this case. And I bet I could show you other examples of similar techniques and tactics that like were used in Southeast Asia or Japan or feudal Japan or dynastic China or whatever. I bet I could find you, because that is a very easy to understand strategy to conquer and crush and assimilate a population. So it's like, rather than going in and killing off all the men and all the children or all the men folk in there, you go in there and you emasculate them, and you still have them as slaves and you still have them as servants to further your ends, rather than just like this senseless bloodshed. But you still have conquered the tribe. It's the same thing, same principle. My question is this: is like, okay, if Nazi Germany does that, or if the Catholic Church does that, or if whatever faction does that, it seems to me that that's the mechanics of it, right? I talk about the mechanics. I say, well, that seems to me like the best strategy to conquer a tribe. Great. Okay, why is that? Why is that the human experience to go and do something like that? And what would be the end? What's the end game? Like, what if Hitler had won the war? What's the end game? Like, is it we're all just going to be blonde-haired, blue-eyed master race people? Was that the goal, or was it to? Most of the time, when we talk about war and we talk about conquering and stuff, it's usually for two things. It's like war is fought for resources. It's fought for resource transfer. It's not like so much about religion. It's not so much about ideology. It's about, I want what you got. That's the most basic understanding of war. When you have more women over there, I want your women. We're going to kill off all your guys, and we're going to take your women, and we're going to breed with your women. You have access to water and food and hunting grounds and everything. We're going to kill you so we can have access to your resources. You have oil. We need oil for our population, so we're going to go over there and kick your ass and take your oil. It's whatever the resource is primarily is what motivates that, as opposed to sort of like ideology and control. It's more like I keep saying, like, people want to keep saying that, well, there's this Illuminati, there's these shadow government, there's this cabal of people that are pulling the strings. And you know what, even if that was true, okay, convince me first of all, and then second of all, why would they even bother? They're humans just like you and me.
Yeah.
They're motivated by this.
Definitely, if you would be up to it, Rollo, because I love this topic, explore it another time, because it's really, really deep, and it's super awesome. But yeah, I do know I have some stuff I can share, but I want to stay on your stuff right now. But yeah, I would love to talk about that in the future. So I'm just looking at stuff I have here. I don't want to get okay. I'll save that for the end. Let's talk about maybe Epstein or Weinstein, if we can go there. What do you or Prince Harry, if you want to go royal family?
Well, I don't think Epstein killed himself. Let's just say that. I think there's something that was really, sketchy about that. Weinstein, obviously, Weinstein is sort of, I don't want to call him a victim, because he was kind of a creepy beta schmuck. Let's
He was a big ogre, wasn't he? Big ogre.
Well, I mean, he was doing what most beta guys. He's a good example of what happens when beta blue pill guys are afforded some amount of fame and a lot of money.
Yeah, I also think he's a sociopath too.
Oh, I'm sure he is as well. But like, you go and you look, you know who else is a sociopath, or who else is a blue pill guy? Is Jeff Bezos. And
yeah, yes, I agree. I agree wholeheartedly.
I mean, look at the whole divorce thing and everything. You look at what he went through, and you look at what he did in the aftermath, going out with Lauren Sanchez after that, and where he's at. He's the richest man in the world, and is also very beta. And why would he ever want to learn game? Why would he ever want to learn anything about intersexual dynamics? Because if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And so you get a guy like Weinstein, you get a guy like Bezos, you get a guy like Elon Musk, you get a guy like remember Louis C.K. Louis C.K. got wrapped up in the Me Too thing, right?
Yeah, he did.
And for what? For jerking off into a potted plant or some shit like that.
Yeah, and apparently the one girl was just cool with it, and they would routinely do it, I guess.
Yeah, and so, but that's behavior that I would expect from a guy who is not used to getting laid. But now, remember what I said, too much, too young, too fast. Suddenly he's got fame, he's got fortune, people know his name. Or Aziz Ansari was another really great example of this. He's a guy.
I don't want to stereotype, but comedians are a certain type, aren't they?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's funny that they are all comedians, but but I mean, what are most male comedians? They're mostly liberal leftist kind of guys. They would like people to believe that they are male feminists, and those are the guys.
Nowadays, yeah.
And so what happens is those are the guys jerking off into potted plants, saying I'm all for women's rights and everything, and making fun of like misogynist guys while they're doing, because they're fundamentally beta. They're fundamentally blue pill. You could say I would say Weinstein is fundamentally beta and fundamentally blue pill, because he learned one way to get laid, which was I'm just going to be a creepy, ugly old guy,
Yeah.
and women are still going to want to have sex with me because I have what they want. It's almost like being a drug dealer.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so you afford guys with that mentality money and fame and at least some sort of transactional sexual attraction, and that's where they go with it. That's what they become. And so I'm not trying to defend those guys whatsoever, but I will say that they got wrapped up in the Me Too thing, and I think they had too much faith in their money and their power, and that things were never going to change, and so that they can go and do whatever they want to. And now it's public. And again, Harvey Weinstein, Louis C.K., all these guys, a lot of the stuff that Harvey Weinstein was accused of was like pre-internet age, right? I mean, we're talking like if you look at Brett Kavanaugh, for example, like they wanted to get him on a Me Too charge from when he was 17 years old, like back in the 80s or something.
Yeah, if that's not a political hit, I don't know what is.
And so that right there, so in as objectively as I can put this, Harvey Weinstein got wrapped up in that in a movement, in a Me Too movement that was only ever made possible in this digital age, in this new order way of doing things.
Definitely. I do think it's a pattern that's happening everywhere, and especially now with this pandemic, is the power structures have been slowly eroding for years now, and especially with the media, since Rollo, you have a big media presence now. How do you trust any of these sources? Do you watch any mainstream news, or
I don't trust any mainstream news whatsoever at all. And it's funny you should say that, because it's actually a theme that's in my fourth book. I wrote an essay called the New Enlightenment, or the Age of the New Enlightenment, and in that I kind of make a comparison to how we used to think about things, like old order. Like one of the old order way of thinking about media was that we could somewhat trust the news organizations to vet themselves, to have an editorial staff, to fact check, to do all these kinds of things. And then we find out in the new order that never happened. And so what were they lying about before we had the internet? What were our media sources lying about back in the 80s, in the 90s, in the early 2000s, before we had instant access? Like, for instance, like when a riot goes down, or like during the first Trump election, you'd get guys like Milo Yiannopoulos or Ann Coulter or whatever, and they'd say, we're going to go give a free speech rally in Berkeley. And you would see like Antifa would be there. There'd be violence. There'd be all this stuff that would be going on. And you would never see it on the news, because that was not what they're supposed to report. But yet you knew it went on, because like a guy like Tim Pool is there videotaping the whole thing live, real time, and broadcasting it on Periscope or Twitter or whatever. And everybody and their mother has a high def 4K cell phone camera wherever they go. And so now we see in the new order, because things have changed technologically, that we see that the sources that we used to trust up until this point have really been full of shit.
Oh yeah, every institution
for a very long time. So that's one example of the new order. So if that's the case, if I know now that, according to what I can see on Twitter, and according to, I'm not saying there's no such thing as fake news, there are, but if I'm watching it happen live, real time with Tim Pool, and it's not on my 6 o'clock news when I'm watching CBS or whatever like that, that leads me to believe that they're trying to filter what it is that I'm supposed to see. Right. And the other thing is that's legacy media. They still think that you're not looking, you're not paying attention, and you are paying attention, because now it's easier than ever. The barrier to entry is gone to pay attention and to be a part of that. Same thing with like Harvey Weinstein. The Me Too movement could never have existed prior to this time. The Me Too hashtag has been around since 2006, but nobody even heard about it until 2017, because that's when everybody made a big deal out of it. And now it's not even just Me Too. It's like time's up. And, and then we have women marching in the streets with big pink pussy hats and everything. And those movements, that understanding could not have ever existed prior to this. Rollo Tomassi, could not have existed as I do at any other point in history than I do right now. Because if I were to write The Rational Male, and I was going to take that, imagine me taking that, the manuscript, and taking it to a publisher and say, will you please publish this book? It's called The Rational Male. It's great. It's like the Bible of the manosphere. Even today, if I were to do that, I would get laughed out of, like, say, a traditional publishing house, because they had the keys to the castle. Well, guess what? Now we have digital publishing, we have print on demand, we have independent authors being published all the time. And unfortunately, it's Amazon that owns 86% of that market. So that's the downside to it. But I could not have existed. Roosh could not have existed. Any of these guys who have a book out right now, they could never have existed prior to, like, say, 2013, 2014.
Yeah. It's the Wild West in that sense, I think.
It's Wild West in a lot of different fields.
Yeah, definitely. And there's vacuums up everywhere too, because of this situation. Are you concerned, or because you're in
I'm in Reno, Nevada.
Reno? Okay, Nevada. That's what I thought. And you're rural, pretty rural as far as I know. You got a nice spot.
No, I mean, Reno, Nevada is actually it's a city. It's
okay. I was just looking at
under
your
a million, but it's somewhere like
Instagram.
700,000 or something like that. Reno, Nevada is actually very developed. We have a very big booming tech center. Tesla is out here too. It's out in the desert here. It's a lot more modern than a lot of people realize. But there's mostly the state of Nevada. Outside of, say, Reno and Las Vegas, it's pretty rural. So I keep track of it. My wife is a healthcare professional, so I'm not going to tell you what she does, but she's actually at the hospital right now. She's seeing the cases. And she's we're taking as many precautions as we can, but we have a pretty low incidence of it right now. I think we're at maybe 6 dead and 300 or so infected right now. I'm not really sure. But we have a pretty low instance of it. Mostly the state of Nevada is really desert. There's only 2 real metropolises in Nevada, and that's Reno and Las Vegas. And Las Vegas has the majority of the cases. So, so as far as that's concerned, I don't know. I have to be cautiously optimistic about it. I think a lot of guys are making a really big deal out of it right now. And I think, as I was saying before, a panic like this could not have existed at any other time. This is one of the downsides of having this instant communication and this constant, like you and I talking right now, or being on Twitter. That's where people are right now. They're all on Twitter right now, and they're all talking about one thing.
Yep.
And the problem, or I think the unique thing about a pandemic is that if I say, maybe you shouldn't panic. Maybe it's not as big a deal. If I even try to, even if I'm objectively trying to relate some facts about it, like if I have numbers or whatever, like I see Candace Owens getting like run up the flagpole right now for saying stuff like, the numbers here are still pretty low. I mean, as a pandemic goes, this is like pretty minor, but like you can't say that. If you say that, then suddenly you're the devil, because you don't believe that the second coming is coming right now. And you don't believe that the evil Illuminati are behind this. And you don't believe that we're going to go to war with China, or you don't believe. And like I was saying before, this whole situation is really bringing out the real natures of people. You think under wraps for a while. Maybe they watched Alex Jones. Maybe they were like listening to Art Bell and the tinfoil hats and all this other stuff. But you kind of like, you knew that your friends were, maybe you're a little whacked, but now they're a lot whacked because they're in a crisis situation.
For me, it's like, and I think everybody too, it feels like there's an invisible guy with a handgun pointed at my head, And
well, I can't say, like, okay, so I'll give you a quick example. Is like, I did a show on my channel on last Sunday about what was it, spinning plate, like plate spinning, just something I book, because I had already talked about the pandemic with the guys on Rule Zero the day before. I talked about it also on the Wednesday before that. And I'm like, okay, that's smarter people than I am are out there apparently. And so I'm just gonna do what I'm gonna do. And it was a good show. People talked about it. And you know what? Even after the pandemic, we're still going to have a sexual marketplace. We're still going to have, because that's a basic thing that people want to solve their reproductive problems. So
I want to go just thing on the pandemic, and then I want to ask actually if you have any intuition or foresight, maybe some clairvoyance on how this will affect the sexual marketplace. But I just want to say something on the pandemic. I'm going to speak for myself only. I can't speak for people who are politicizing it, because I really don't. I'm not on the blue squad. I'm not on the red squad. I used to be blue, but that was by virtue of my family, and when you're a child, it was never really an interest point to me until 2016, when it was like, okay, I got to the point where I can't ignore politics anymore. But as far as this pandemic, I am afraid, because these types of things, they only pop up once or twice a century, and they can last for a year or 5 years. And I think obviously this is the best time for this to happen, if that's such a thing that can be said. Because if this happened like maybe 100 years ago, I would say a conservative estimate. Obviously, I'm just some random guy on the internet, so keep that in mind. But I would say my guess would be a fourth of the world would have been wiped out or more. I talked to this doctor, two doctors. One's a neuroscientist, and another guy who does like financial stuff. And I don't know. He went to Harvard, but if anybody wants to check it out, I have it on my channel, and you can check out all these guys' credentials. Smart dudes, but he's talking about the ability for this particular pathogen to mutate, and the fact that it's been I don't know the exact terminology, but there's basically, you can tell if it's been modified or mutated, changed basically. And he said 1 or 2 is normal, or common, and but this thing has 4, so it has a high degree of mutation, and they're seeing this as they're tracking it across the US. So the virus that they stopped in South Korea and in China is going to be way weaker than the one that's coming our way right now, which I don't think people understand. And another thing too is the infection rate is actually increasing. It's up to, I think, 17% now. And again, I'm not a statistics major, but the moving target of the open cases is not a good stat to look at. You want to look at closed cases. And of course, yes, old people are dying more, but that can be said of any illness. And as this virus is mutating, we are seeing young people dying. And he made the point too that, as you may or may not know, these pathogens affect different ethnicities and races differently. And he's thinking that it might affect, well, of course, it's affecting males worse, but white males in particular, and Asian males. Asian males, because they smoke the most out of any demographic, which I can attest to, having lived in Japan. And white males as a result of basically their genetic makeup. So if you're white and male and smoke, and you're out of shape, which is, I think, a lot of the country,
70% of the country.
yeah, you got a huge target on your back. And this thing does not discriminate. It's like an army that's invading the the world. It's going to come everywhere at some point. It's just a matter of time.
I hear a lot of people saying that, like, if it were a weapon, that it would be the perfect weapon. Like in the age, wait, we can't use nuclear weapons anymore. We're not going to have a war based on the kinds of dynamics, let's just say, that we had in World War II, or maybe.
Oh yeah, of course not.
Something. You're not going to have conventional warfare anymore. This is unconventional warfare. Whether it is or it's not, I understand. I've read this stuff. I understand what people are saying. They're saying, well, if you're going to create a weapon, this would be a greater weapon, because what happens is you kill off. You can selectively kill off people, and the actual weapon is not the virus itself. It's the panic that goes after it, and it's crashing your opponent's market and destroying their market and getting back on top of it. I mean, if you think about it, that's what the U.S. did in World War II. Is you've got Europe that's pretty much devastated, Russia is devastated, China is devastated, Japan is blown off the map. Pretty much every civilized nation except for the United States had to rebuild, and the U.S. became this economic powerhouse as a result of their entry into World War II. So from an economics perspective, that's great. Well, can we do something like that with a pathogen? Can we create something that's a tailor-made? I think we can. I'm sure, certainly we can. And we already know that there is an archive of viruses and everything that's in Wuhan. And I've read the stuff, and I've heard the ideas that, like, oh, this is actually an act of war. Well, and it would make sense also, because what did Trump do at the very beginning? He decided that he wanted to start a trade war with China. He wanted to do he wanted to get a better deal, I guess. And he's been the Teflon president. Everything they've thrown at him, he can't get impeached. And interesting that right after the impeachment failed in February, that this comes out now in an election year, attacking his greatest strength, which is
I agree. And that's again, I'm not sure if that is what's going on. I don't necessarily think
everything lines up. I'm not saying it's intentional.
Yeah, that's the thing, though, is like these things, they've ravaged humanity forever. I mean, there's artwork centuries old about the Black Death, and it's something that happens. Okay, and these viruses have been here billions of years, and I think we'll be here after us. My concern is, so I think of it like a spring, or like what do you call it? Like a dam. So if you don't plug up the hole, it's just gonna come in a huge tidal wave. Am I thinking about it the right way? I don't know for sure. That's what I believe, and that's what I fear.
What if there's already a cure for it? What if there's already an antidote for it?
There could be, yeah.
I would suggest it's probably there. They're going to let it run its course. They're going to come out with an antidote once they get to a certain amount of people, a casualty level, and then that's their whole. I think really, if this is, I think one of the reasons why Trump keeps saying this is a Chinese virus is because he's sending the message: we know it's you. We know you guys are we know that this is an attack on our country, but they can't say that, because that starts a real war, right? Not just,
I mean, if it was released on purpose, that is a declaration of war. No doubt. But we don't know. And at this point, it doesn't really matter, in my opinion, either, because this thing it doesn't care. It's going to kill a communist or a fascist either way.
I put this tweet out there, and I think you probably saw it. And I said, what's going to kill more people, the economic fallout of this or the actual virus itself? And I would say, I would argue that it's going to be the economic fallout, the people losing their jobs, suicide rate, the things that are either directly or indirectly attributable to the economic damage that this does. Because the attack, like I said, it's horrible. I mean, I don't want people to die, right? But the attack is not on the population; it's the attack on the economy. And if you go and you look at we had almost 4 years of a bull market, and all of that is wiped out inside of a week.
Yeah.
So imagine this in the future. Are you going to fuck with China? Are you going to start a trade war?
That's another thing too, is like we outsource so much, so it's like now we're realizing, oh fuck, these guys who may have just declared war on us, they actually make most of our things, and especially pharmaceuticals
as far as viruses go, as far as like you're talking about the Black Death, and we're talking about Spanish flu and everything. This is COVID. This is not anthrax. Okay. This is not like something that has a 50% kill rate. This is something that has like a fraction of 1% kill rate thus far. I mean, when you look at the total numbers on the total population, it's not like they couldn't have manufactured one that's like 3 or 10 times as deadly as this one is too. So basically it's like, this is the message. This is the warning. This is, you start fucking with us and you want to fuck with us in a trade war. This is what you can expect if you do this. And I think what it's supposed to be is a message to the American people to say, vote this son of a bitch out of office. That's what they want to happen. And right now, I don't know. I don't really know what to think. I voted for Trump simply out of pragmatism because I thought he was better than Hillary Clinton. Right.
Yeah. I regret not voting for him, to be honest.
I'm not red and I'm not blue. I voted for Obama before because I thought he was the best guy to be,
at the time.
Given the choices that two choices I'm given, I voted for him. And so I voted for Trump. Like I'm the Democrat to deplorable, right? And so now it's not like I'm not like married to any one of these parties, although I will
Right.
say that here's another thing, as I was saying before, as far as the old order is concerned, and now that we live in this new order, as we have had the internet and technology expand and we've globalized our society, we've also polarized our society that much more. So like the people who are on the left are really just frothing at the mouth, extremists like Trump derangement syndrome, and then you got the right over here, which are, there's some guys that are trying to be a little bit more moderate, but then you've got the guys who are just like, the world's ending, oh my god, ethno-nationalism, all right,
Yeah.
like, so you got like such a gulf between
Yeah.
political ideologies that we've never had before, and it happened in the space of like 5 to 10 years, and that's
Yeah.
all it took, because that's that's the machine. That's our nature. We're tribalistic. That's what we do as human beings. That's how we experience our world.
I predict a hard lockdown coming soon just because we're so close to Washington. And I mean, I'm wrong. I really hope I'm wrong, but this is one of those situations where I think collectively preparing for the worst is better than the opposite. But
I mean,
talked about
I'm gonna do what I'm gonna do. It's just like, again, it's like I don't think we do ourselves any favors by freaking out and like
no doubt.
like thinking, yeah, we're gonna experience a recession. Yeah, we're gonna have an economic decline as a result of this. So rather than like, tear your hair out or just pretend it's not gonna happen, like start thinking about what you can do. Like look for the opportunities that are gonna be available to you. That's all you can do. That's all you could do back in 2001 after 9/11. That's all you could do, and after the housing crash, it's all you can do right now. So, and I think this generation of people just I mean, the last time we had to deal with something like this was around 2008, 2009, somewhere.
Yeah.
And that was just a housing crash. That wasn't like a virus or anything.
Yeah.
So we're
I think this is way bigger than that. I think.
Yeah, it's way bigger than that. It's something new. And that's really challenging, particularly to a generation that's not really good at challenges. They want their safe spaces. They want their, their little snowflake areas.
I think it's a very much needed wake-up call for a lot of people, but especially young people. I mean, we've had this anomaly and unprecedented growth and peace and safety for the last, whatever it is, 40 years or so, that has never, never happened in world history. Yes, there have been small wars and conflicts around the world, but if you look at it, and World War II was the inflection point for this, right? It's just the ultimate death laboratory, almost 65 million people dead, right? And after that, you see this just drop off, right, of wars and deaths in the world. So people, and especially young people, I think, someone your age, Rollo, and your demographic has a little more, I think, a better grasp of reality than a lot of these kids do. We've just been living in this world of Snapchat and Instagram and iPhones and ordering food and smoking weed and doing drugs, because that's what Americans can do nowadays, because it's really easy to do, because we live in the greatest country that has ever existed, and the most comfortable existence that has ever been for humans. And combined with, the media distrust, that's why I'm concerned, partially because this is real danger. And everyone's like, either not in denial, unaware of it, or they're just going back to what they usually do, which is kind of just, whatever they would do on the weekend, I guess.
Well, it can't handle too much reality, right? I mean, that's at what point are you going to be sick of, there's things that I would love to be doing right. Usually right now, I'm at band practice right now.
Yeah.
And I can't, I'm not going out there because, well, none of the guys, like one of the guys in my band, he just had a baby, and if he gets it, that's a death sentence for the baby. So he's got to.
Yeah, going to be a second wave that's stronger and a third wave that's even stronger. And in the Spanish flu, the second wave decimated young people almost exclusively.
Yeah, well, I mean, you have to do what you have to do, right? I'm fortunate that, like right now, I'm taking this time to write the book, to write book 4, and to really get it to where I want it to be. I'm glad if there's a silver lining to this, I'm glad I haven't published it yet, because now I can like go back and change the foreword of the book to reflect what's been, a post-virus world, as opposed to like what I would have published before all of this.
Yeah, it would have made it irrelevant almost, right? Well, not irrelevant, but it would have been missing something very important, a very large piece of it, I would say. Exactly. But your new book, your 4th book, is concerned with religion, as I understand it. And this is really interesting to me, because I did a little bit of writing, just like kind of diary writing, not the sort of writing that you did, related to this last year. And I grew up quite religious. My grandfather was a minister and a missionary. So I have a lot of experience with being in that religious environment. And I thought of it as a vehicle for getting more people, basically more beta males or more males who would not have a mate otherwise, a vehicle for obtaining that, essentially. And then I saw that you were writing about it, and I'm like, oh wow, I'm really excited. He picked up on this idea too, and I'm sure he's going to go a lot deeper into it.
Yeah, I am. That's funny. I just got done on Rule Zero, talking about the soulmate myth, and then I was also talking about that on Wednesday on a quick one-off, a 20-minute video that I did about the soulmate myth. And I think you're right. I think that particularly in westernized mainstream religion, it's become sort of a beta factory to create guys who follow along a secularized, like a lot of people call it churchianity, right? It's church culture that has sort of infiltrated and assimilated these mainstream religions, and in doing so, it used to be a good bet for you to go find your wife or whatever in church or Bible study or whatever, what, maybe you're Muslim, maybe you're Jewish, whatever. All those bets are off now, and maybe that's going to change. I don't know. Maybe in a post-virus world that changes a little bit. I think a lot of guys are saying that, like, oh, this is the end of feminism. It's the end of the red pill's not making any difference anymore because women are going to all become Susie Homemaker and they're going to be June Cleaver, and now
Ecam girl too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're gonna get two kinds of girls: Ecam girl or June Cleaver. Those are your choices.
No in between.
Because again, human nature doesn't change just because of a virus. It doesn't change. Obviously, it doesn't change.
Yeah.
People. I saw this morning some chick jumped on the brass bull in Wall Street.
Oh yeah, I saw that, and she was naked, wasn't she?
Yeah, to make some point, like, oh, I don't believe in COVID, whatever, But like,
how much you want to bet she's single?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Of course she is, but she's again drawing attention. You can make money off of that. You could never do that. Like, imagine that happening in 1995. It would not cross anyone's mind to do something like that, because we didn't have the technology to make that something that people could instantly access and say, oh, look at me. Nobody would care. It might have made the local news, and that would have been it. Nobody would have cared about it. Now she's famous all over the world because she did that. But like I said, human nature doesn't change just because of a pandemic. It doesn't change because of a nuclear war. It doesn't change because of any of this kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's constant.
It is. And so, when guys say, well, feminism is over, well, you might have put it on pause for a little bit. I've always argued this about feminism. I said, I don't believe that there has ever been a wave of feminism. Like, guys want to say, like, well, the first wave of feminism was good because it got women the vote and the suffragettes and everything. Like, you don't understand that the founding principles of feminism that were really put into writing back in Seneca Falls in 1849 were the same things that we're seeing right now.
Is that like Louise May Alcott and those group of women?
Old school stuff, like the old suffragettes, and then it passed where it went from the United States to Britain and all over the place. And the only thing that there's never been any waves of feminism. It's always been the same sentiment throughout history. The only thing that separates them has been wars, famine, plague, and other things that have put feminism on hold until it could come back again. And you know what's going to happen after this? It's going to go on hold. And as soon as the coast is clear, it's going to come right back again, because human nature does not fucking change.
Oh yeah. There's a lot of shit's going to go on hold, like the more than one gender or more than two gender thing, and all this nonsense that has been going on for the last couple of years.
You won't hear that you probably won't hear that until
at least a year, maybe.
At least a year, maybe the end of the year, maybe 8 months. You'll hear it again. I don't know. We'll see how long this lasts. But again, anytime real shit goes down, you put all that on hold. That's why there's no waves of feminism. It's just been the same thing. It's just been interrupted by 2 world wars, and social and civil unrest. That's the only thing that has stopped feminism, and it's always been that way, and it will come back just the same way that it has.
How would you define it?
Learn it, because we don't learn anything. How would I define what feminism?
Yeah. In your words.
Feminism is a hate movement, first off, and then second of all, it is it's a supremacism movement. and you don't get equality from feminism. We know, we can see that. Another thing that another benefit of the new order where we're at with, we remember I was telling you, giving you the example of how we can see what the media prior to the internet age used to tell us. And now in the new age, we can see that they've been lying, or we can see that they're fake news, or we can see that it's certainly controlled, because now we have instant access to it, like Tim was there. The same thing applies to feminism. So we can say, if you go and you look at feminism from, say, like the sexual revolution or whatever, like let's just say the 1970s, all the way up to 2001 or 2000, once the internet started becoming more standard and common and everything, now we can see live in real time what feminism is really all about. And it's not about equality. It's never been about equality. And so when we see live in real time women in their pink pussy hats, and we see e-celebrities or celebrities like railing against men, and we see Elizabeth Warren throwing red meat to the feminists in her campaign stump speeches and everything, when you see that live in real time and you see that all the time, you get a better understanding of what the whole thing was really all about, because you can't escape it anymore. And all you have to do, you don't even have to really have all of that keen an interest in it. It's in your face 24/7. So now, in the same way that we know that the media has been lying to us, we also know that feminism has been lying to us as well, because they say, oh, it's all about equality and gender parity and everything. No, bullshit. It's about supremacism, and it's about power. And they'll say, well, what about patriarchy? Yeah, that was about supremacism, and that was about power too. So
I think with anything, any grassroots movement, it gets co-opted at some point. It gets hijacked by the sociopaths, by the psychos.
I see. Here's the thing about feminism. I don't think it was ever a good grassroots thing that got corrupted. It has always been corrupted. And if you go back even to like the suffragettes, and you look, I can, like, for instance, when we get off of this, I can send you links, and I can send you.
Oh yeah, I love it, man. I'm always willing to evolve my thinking.
Well, that
if I can, if I find some new truth.
I can send you JPEGs of magazine and newspaper clippings from like the late 1800s into the 1900s, where the suffragettes were bombing churches. They were killing their husbands. They were essentially, like, back then, nobody says this. You don't learn this in women's studies, but they were considered terrorists back then. And up until they got the vote, they were considered terrorists. And remember, even when they got the vote, it was because one blue pill beta chump decided to do what his mom told him to do. And that's what was the deciding vote, at least in the United States, to give women the right to vote. And as the MGTOWs will remind you constantly, is that once women got the right to vote, they will not vote for anything except for what is in their own female best interests. And that's why you have abortion on demand. That's why you have the divorce laws. That's why you have Duluth model of feminism. That's why you have all this stuff that sort of flowed after that, and certainly after the sexual revolution. And that's why you have modern feminism today. It's the same sentiment as it was from 1849. It's just now we have more modern ways to affect all of that, and it's still the same impetus, basically.
What I don't understand from, I guess, people that I interact with, like young people or anyone really, is just, if you see some of these things that are being written about men in the media, if that was written about women or a woman, like,
the script,
the outrage, and it's like in the stuff, dude, it's just like, it's just hatred, a lot of it, it's like, how can you deny, some of it's like, okay, maybe you can have a really shitty debate that is telling me that's not misandristic, or it's not hatred, or it's just not negatively fueled, but a lot of it is, it seems.
I put this, I could dig it up for you, but I put this one image, and it was in book 3, I think it was, or no, maybe I just made reference to it. I remember seeing, like, on this chalkboard one time, I think it was around the time of the first women's march, right after Trump got elected. And it was on this chalkboard, and it said, men must be actively disempowered to empower women. And that, to me, says everything that you need to know about feminism right there.
That's a zero-sum game.
It's not about equality. It has never been about equality. It has always been about supremacism and hatred, and it's anti-human is what it is. It's I've always said this, is that men and women are complements to one another. We evolved to be complements. My strengths make up for my wife's weaknesses, and vice versa. If you look at the way that our evolved, well, first of all, just what we are as men and what we are as women are the mechanics of us, our brain architecture, our chemical makeup, our behaviors, what we have natural proclivities for, what we don't, those things. We are not the same.
Yeah.
We have been
And
taught
if you've ever, if people listening have ever been in charge of children, which I hope you only have if you've been qualified to, but you see this, man. They're just, the boys and the girls are so different, even, and maybe even especially in high school. You know, you talk to like some of the girls and it's almost like you're talking to an adult, you know. And then, you know, the guys, you know, they're just different. They develop at different rates,
yeah,
and
we mature differently.
yeah.
The other thing that I think has been sort of a tragedy of the last, certainly just in the last like 5 or 6 years, not even the last 10 years, is this idea that gender is a social construct. Whereas I can show you legitimate proof of gender differences in the was it the fMRI scans, I think was I can show you the gendered differences in a baby's brain, like in the womb of a baby boy and a baby girl, and the differences that take place in utero. It happens before you even out of the womb.
I
But
read this book called The Gender Paradox, I believe it's called, by it's Steven Pinker. I'm sure you know who that is. It's his sister, Susan Pinker, who I believe is also a PhD, and she is a really great book. She talks about basically exactly what you're talking about the brain differences and how women's brains actually communicate across the hemispheres more frequently, whereas guys compartmentalize activities in the brain more.
Right, because we have natural proclivities, we have evolved mental firmware. This is the one thing that I talk about in my books and I talk about in my essays and stuff, is that like we have our hardware, which is our body, our chemical makeup, our brains, everything. Then we have our firmware, which is our natural proclivities that we have evolved for. There are evolved mental firmware. Those are gendered. So there are certain things that as a man I have an easier time with. I have a natural aptitude for that that a woman doesn't, and the same, and vice versa. So, for instance, like because of the brain architecture, women's natural evolved firmware is to communicate differently than men do, and to have a more a bigger, not bigger, but a more complete, more aptitude, I guess, for communication that men don't. That's why I always try to emphasize that men and women communicate differently. Men communicate overtly, women communicate, covertly. They deal in subcommunications and nuances and facial.
I was ranting about something unrelated on my Snapchat about this guy who was, this is before I found out the Surgeon General of the Western world said the same thing about the masks. I ranted about him, but somebody on my Snapchat saw it, female, and I got mad because of what I just said. And she's like, well, how do you know what he meant? And I was like, well, I focus on what people say, not what they may have meant.
You can ask him what he meant. Yeah,
I could have. I didn't really care to, though, because I was talking to the blonde cashier.
Yeah, she can ask him what he meant, because it's like, I'm reporting to you what I'm reading right here. If you decide that you want to find some sort of different meaning or whatever it is, some subjective meaning, well, that tells me a lot about where you're coming from. But the thing is that we as human beings, we have our, like I said, our hardware, our firmware, and we have our software. And the software is like what we learn and what we are taught, what we're acculturated for, what we're taught by our families, our churches, our schools, our popular culture, that kind of stuff. And so and the thing I think people really don't realize is that we can learn to sublimate our natural evolved mental firmware with our software if that serves our better purpose for that. But or it can be used to really damage us. We can have bad software as easily as we can have, as easily as a computer can get a virus as well, right? So that's usually, and maybe that's, people say, well, that's really reductionist. And I'm like, well, yeah, but that's a good predictive framework to use.
It's a good analogy.
So if we can stay with that, and then there's, I got other stuff that I talk about as well, but the point I'm making is that particularly in this age, really, I should say since maybe the early 60s, we have we've decided that the blank slate is what we should be focusing on, and that everybody's the same. And the only reason we have differences between people is because it's a social construct, and we're still clinging to that old bullshit today. And we still cling to the idea that gender is a social construct. It is not a social construct. There are natural proclivities that men and women have that are gender specific, that lead to who we are as people and what we are and what we do. And the same thing, like what you just mentioned, Steven Pinker, one of the things he said is that, as he did this one, and for whatever reason it was very controversial, he did this one talk, and I think it wasn't a TED talk, it was at a college.
Oh yeah, it was like an academic,
Mhm.
just a quick lecture he did. I
He was
think this
talking
was a
about
couple years ago now, wasn't it?
it was this meta study, and he was relating the results of this meta study about 6 primary gender differences between men and women. And one of those, like I think it was the first or second one, was like men tend to be more interested in things, and women tend to be more interested in people. Why? Because we have conventional gender differences that are part of our evolved mental firmware that predispose us to those things. Can a woman learn to do something that a man can? Yes,
Of
absolutely. You
course.
got to have the software to teach you how to do that. You don't have a natural aptitude for it like a man does, but you can certainly learn to do those things, and even maybe even excel at those things. And same thing vice versa. The point is, if we are born with those natural aptitudes and those natural proclivities in the first place, that you want to deny ever existed at all. And that's
Mm.
where I draw the line. And that is really the fundamental principle behind feminism, because we're all equal and everything's a social construct. And the only reason that men find some women beautiful is because they've been taught by society.
Yeah.
Bullshit. It's your
Yeah. Or
natural.
it's like, it's a standard. That's another one I hear. Like makeup is a standard. Like, well, as far as as what I've read, there's some sort of adornment that women have always done,
Oh, yeah,
whether
no.
it's their hair or
I mean,
whatever,
there's always going to be and there's cross-cultural studies that show that there are actual objective beauty standards for, like, men tend to select for women that are young and fertile, have a hips to waist ratio, all this other kind of stuff. And it doesn't matter
Mhm.
whether you're in, Mongolia, or you're in,
Mhm.
Dallas, Texas. The same thing happens, right? Guys are interested in what they're interested in, women are interested in what they're interested in. And there's nothing wrong with accepting that that's okay.
Mhm.
So and that's so when we talk about the whole point of this thing is like, women, particularly in the feminist movement, want to say, well, we're just trying to get gender equality. There is never going to be gender equality. There's never going to be equality, period, because equality as a concept presumes a vacuum. It presumes that everybody's the same, and the only reason that
Mhm.
there's inequality is because of a social, or there's some nefarious, Illuminati, right? There's some sort of outside influence that's making things unequal, and all we got to do is erase that, and then things will be equal. No,
No, it doesn't work
the
that
world is
simply.
the world.
The world's a little more complex
We're
than
not
that.
born equal. It's like we have deficits and we have strengths, and we have to find ways to become better people using those things that our talents and our skills and everything else that we have. And you know what? Some people are born into shit, and some people are born into, something into talent. That's
Mm.
the challenge. That's what makes life interesting, man. It's like, so we want to all be equal. No, equality, whether it's like gender equality or whatever, only leads to homogeny, and that ends up leading to like stasis. And we
And communism.
and well, communism, but like, I'm sort of reducing this down to sort of like the biological level, is that the organisms that are androgynous, organisms that are homogenous, tend to die off because they can't adapt to change, because there's no radical, there's nothing that's radical. They're all equal, right? They're all the same. Guess
Yeah.
what? They all have the same equal weaknesses and the same equal strengths. Guess what? If there's a virus that attacks that strength, well, you're all the same. You all die.
Y'all
End of
go.
story. Bye bye. Next, let's get the next species in here and see if it adapts any better.
This is making me, what you just said, that just made me think of uh the fact that, I don't know, just about like people having babies and gene pools, and how maybe what has caused this virus to get so strong is the fact that, because its viruses are encountering people with bigger gene pools and stronger immune systems, I think.
Globalize. It's a globalized event.
Yeah.
That's why when we had the
I
thing.
speaking for myself, I'm a halvesy. My mom is white, my dad is from Mexico. So
Well, so here's and we got a break after this, but like in my upcoming book, I talk about, like I said, this sort of new order kind of thing, and primarily that new order is the result of globalization, and the globalization is not just about economics; it's about everything. As we're seeing, it's also about pandemics and virology or whatever you want to call it. It's also about that. It's also the sexual marketplace is globalized now too. Our social ideas, the exchange of ideas is now globalized right now. Like you just said, hey, I'm half Mexican, I'm half white. Right. Well, I'm all white, so I can talk to you now through StreamYard here.
Yeah.
Where you're at, but you're miles away. We could never have done this like 10 years ago. This would not have happened. We wouldn't have this conversation, but we can do it, and we don't even think twice about it anymore because we live in a globalized society and we don't realize that we're in that globalized society. So, like I said before, there's a lot of strengths and a lot of advantages, but there's also weaknesses to that. So a globalized society gets a pandemic and we're all screwed. Our economics, like the United States economy crashes, guess what happens to like third world countries' economies as a result of that are dependent on that. So there's all kinds, like we have this interconnectivity. And I understand there's a lot of guys who want to be, very nationalistic right now. And I understand that because as human beings, we're more tribal, but we're being forced now to live in a globalized society on so many different levels. And I don't think that we're really ready for that right now. I think it's happening so rapidly. It's happening more rapidly than any other generation of human beings has ever had to deal with this. And we don't recognize it. We don't think that. We don't think anything of it. I made this prediction on the last episode of Rule Zero in December, right before the New Year's. I said there will be.
I almost got on this show. I don't know if you remember or if your moderator told you, but I was about to go in, and dude, I'm not gonna lie, I got nervous. I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm about to talk to Rollo," and I couldn't think of a question, and I was like, "Give me a second," and then like the lobby closed, so I was like, "Oh shoot."
Well, I made this prediction. I said that there's going to be probably some sort of new technology in the future that is going to change things up. Like right now, we take for granted that we can go on, YouTube or on Twitter and just engage and sort of go into this globalized marketplace of ideas and talk about things. Now, here's my other, just sort of my ending point here is, and one of the things that I talk about in that article and also in the book, and getting back to China again. We can now gene edit. We have mapped the human genome, and we can make designer babies now. I don't know if you ever saw that movie Gattaca.
I have not seen it.
You should watch that, especially now. You should watch that. But what it is it's pretty much our ability, like human beings' ability to control our genetics and control our biology through mapping the human genome. And there was in China, I forget the guy's name, a Chinese name, as a doctor there who was sanctioned for this, but he created the first gene edited baby. At least that's what the talk was, and he went against bioethics and did it anyways, just to do it. And he was sanctioned for it. I don't know if he went to jail or whatever for it, but the fact remains this is it's in our reach right now as human beings in this generation as a species to create the next generation. If we wanted to, if we chose to do this tomorrow, we could say we're going to have the next strain of human beings and they're going to be resistant against this virus and they're going to be resistant against this. And where they're all going to have blonde hair and blue eyes or black hair and brown eyes or whatever we think right now would be the best thing for our kids. Like I want to have a girl and I want her to have blue eyes and I want her to have big tits and I want her to have a blonde hair and all this other stuff. We can now, theoretically, we can't, maybe we don't have the technology 100%, but we'll get there. We know how to do it. We know that we have the map, but what's going to happen is now we can engineer the next generations of human beings rather than having them be subject to a natural environment. So what happens is that the coming age of the next generations, like let's just say for sake of argument, we follow Gattaca, right? We engineer the next generations of human beings. Those human beings will be engineered based on what our ideologies are today. So what do we think is good today? Do we think feminism is good? What about gays? Like gays will say, well, I got the gay gene. I can't help be the way that I am. It's a genetic thing. Well, let's just even say, first of all, I don't believe that, but let's just say for sake of argument, it's true. Should we edit out the gay gene? Because what's normal? Should you be homosexual or should you be heterosexual? Well, if that's a flaw, if we think that homosexuality is a genetic flaw and we can edit that out of the next generation, aren't we doing a good thing by taking out that flaw? Because that's what we see as normal, heteronormative, whatever you want to call it. Should we do that? What about can we, like, if I say, well, we can cure by genetically editing things, we can cure sickle cell anemia in Black people. Great, cool. Should we do that? You know, it depends on what your
ethics or stance are.
ethics and your ideology.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean. I'm throwing these out there again as sort of hypotheticals, but we have the capacity to do this now. We can engineer viruses. We can sure as shit engineer the next generation of kids to be whatever we want them to be. But what do we want them to be depends on what our ideologies are right now. Do we want we can make super soldiers, man. We can space marines, man. We can make guys that are just like yoked and because they have we can make them mesomorphs, right? They put on more muscle mass and they're more better fit for fighting or for survival. Is that the way we should go? Or should we concentrate on guys who have like really super minds and like big giant eggheads and they should be the next generation? Or do we want to make women, you know, into genetic lesbians? Or do we want them to be like, you know, beautiful sex models that we just really want to have sex with all the time? Like, what do we want to do? Where do we go with all of this? And what's funny is I'm probably pissing off people right now by even this question. By making you think about that. What are we going to do? How's this going to work? Because it's all dependent on your fucking ideology right now. What do you think is going to go? Because what you think right now is going to affect what was the things that we do now echo in eternity. It's going to definitely have something to do with the next generations of people.
Yeah, I agree. And just to end on that, if somebody wants to try this out, I tried it several times. If you go on Wikipedia and you follow this algorithm of clicking the first noun, so first lowercase noun, and you just keep doing that, something like 97% of the time, you're going to get back to the philosophy page. And the other 3%, you're going to be stuck in loops in math or physics, or you're going to get a dead end. But yeah, the rest of it, 97% of the time, you keep doing that, it all goes back to philosophy.
What's your ideology? What's your ideological bent? What do you believe? What you believe will end up in the next generation, one way or the other, whether it's by ideas or how you raise your kids, or else it's, in this case, it might even be literal. You might be able to engineer your children to be what you think is the best thing that they should be.
Right.
And I think that's kind of dangerous too, to be honest with you. I think natural evolution is probably a better way to allow for that kind of stuff. But, you know, who knows? I don't think that I don't, the genie's out of the bottle. How can we not do it now?
Well, thank you so much, Rollo. I really appreciate it. Like I said, I've been following you for a couple of years now and will continue to do so, because I can tell you are doing this. You're coming from a good place when you're doing your work, which is great. And if anybody wants to check out his links, I'll put all of Rollo Tomassi's social links in the description, as well as his website and blog. If you don't want to buy his books, you don't have to, but check out his blog, check out his tweets. I would go to the blog first. That gets right to the kind of the nitty gritty of the distilled wisdom and information that Rollo is trying to teach to people, and not just men, right? Rollo, you got some female readers too, right?
I got a handful of female readers. A lot of them like try to create like YouTube channels as sort of I don't want to say they're advocates, but they're positive critics, let's just say.
I'll have to check some of those out. That's super interesting. Well, if you want to chat again, Rollo, sometime, I would love to. I definitely did not get to all the questions that I wanted to ask you, but I do have to be respectful of your time. I hope everyone listening really takes this pandemic seriously and does the proper precautions, washing hands, covering faces, etc. Because as Mr. Miyagi said, the best defense is to not be there. Right. And that's true of boxing, that's true of chess, and that's true of this virus. This virus is an army that it doesn't discriminate. And so I just want to say that, not to scare people, but just so people can think and be prepared. Rollo, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, brother. And if anybody wants to follow him, again, all social links in the description box below. Rollo, thank you so much. And until next time, brother.
All right, check it out. Bye.
Ciao.